The chime of the bell beckons us into a sacred time on this Easter morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, a congregation that welcomes you no matter what you look like or who you love, and no matter how you practice spirituality, because we know we need not think alike to love alike. We extend a heartfelt and inclusive invitation to join us in meaningful worship and in service to the world. We greet all those who join us this morning, those here in our sanctuary, all of our many online viewers, así como el creciente número de participantes bilingües que nos acompañan desde sus hogares. Please make note that the responses that were once found in your order of service are now on laminated cards. And while mask wearing in the sanctuary is currently optional, you're encouraged to continue to wear your mask if you're more comfortable doing so. Now, please join Dr. Rock and the Sanctuary Choir and raise your voice in song for our first hymn.
Friends, we gather on this holy day, this day that we have been given, this day in which we are breathing, being, this day on which we have gathered. Let it be a day filled with joy, peace, thanksgiving, and human fellowship, and all that we need so that we each might find a blessing and bless each other and bless the world. May we each wake up this fine day to the simple beauty that can be found all around us. And come, friends, let us worship together.
Please join with me in reading the Congregational Covenant on the back of the Order of Service. Love is the spirit of our congregation. Service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to encourage one another. Thus do we covenant.
The First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston has been a beacon of inclusive religion since 1914, and the faith of our members continues to grow.
Unitarian Universalists are curious, lifelong learners of all ages. And as we learn, our beliefs change, our knowledge expands, and our faith grows.
Our spiritual community is moving into the future with a new vision, mission, and covenant to focus our hopes and intention. The vision of our community is widening love's circle. We widen the circle by providing a spiritual home for people with diverse theologies, including theists, atheists, pagans, liberal Christians, Jews, Muslims, and many others.
We're not only diverse theologically, we have programs for children, youth, and all ages.
We also widen the circle through our social justice and community service work.
Bob Shibley, a longtime minister, created Sanctuary for Political Refugees decades ago, and we continue to work for immigrants' rights to this day. He was the first openly gay minister in a predominantly non-LGBTQ congregation in the city. We continue the battle for those rights, both here and in Austin.
We embraced our racially and economically diverse neighborhood and learned from and advocate for those we refuse to banish to the outside of love's circle.
We offer several Spanish language services throughout the church year, and all of our Sunday services feature elements in Spanish.
Our spiritual community widens the circle to include all those who covenant with us to agree how we will treat each other and the world. We do not all hold the same religious beliefs. We do not have a creed. Instead, each week in our services, we covenant together.
Love is the spirit of our congregation. Service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to encourage one another. Thus do we covenant.
Our church's newly adopted mission statement makes explicit our intentions going into the next chapter of our story.
Located in Houston's Museum District, the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston commits to being a growing multicultural, multi-generational, and multiracial congregation in the city's diverse urban center.
We widen love's circle by honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all, advancing justice and religious pluralism, and inspiring an ever-deepening spirituality.
In the coming years, we shall serve as a pillared congregation for Houstonians of many faiths and build the beloved community by
providing religious leadership and collective action devoted to ecological, social, and racial justice,
increasing the opportunities for transformative spiritual growth for members and seekers,
serving as responsible stewards through a commitment of our time, talent, and treasure,
and expanding and deepening our intergenerational community.
To help us become that pillar congregation for Houstonians, and to help us build the beloved community, we are asking those who join us on Sundays, either online or in person, to help us widen love's circle.
Our members and friends have received pledge cards in the mail. We hope you will return those completed pledge cards promptly.
Because our in-person Sunday services are live streamed, people from around the world with internet access watch our services.
If you enjoy our services online, even if you've never been here in person, consider making a pledge. Scan this QR code to make your pledge to support the work of our church.
Or you can simply make a financial contribution by texting FIRSTUU to 73256.
The First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston has a proud legacy, and our vision, mission, and covenant ensure an exciting future. Join us in widening love's circle.
It's Easter. And Easter is about springtime and new life. And it's about baby animals being born, like baby chicks and lambs and bunnies. And it also has a history in the Christian faith that goes back for thousands of years. So today, I want us to share a bit about Jesus. He was a rebel, and he taught about love. And I would like to invite any children to come and sit right here, and we're going to watch this for some pictures. Come on up, if you'd like. Maggie, come on. Do you want to come? Good morning. This is a story of Jesus, a beloved teacher. And although he lived long ago, his lessons of love and kindness still bring hope and joy to people all over the world. Jesus was born more than 2,000 years ago in a land that is now called Israel. He grew up in the town of Nazareth with his brothers and sisters and their parents, Mary and Joseph. You may remember this from the Christmas pageant. Joseph and Mary raised Jesus in the traditions of their Jewish faith. Jesus learned to read the Torah, a sacred book that Jewish people believe was inspired by God. As Jesus and Joseph worked side by side in the carpentry shop, they talked about religion, and Jesus felt a strong connection to God, and he began to sense that God had called him to bring people a new message of love and forgiveness. When he grew up, Jesus began to travel the countryside and tell people ideas about living together in peace and harmony. Soon, crowds gathered to hear him preach. People who were sick often came to him, and he helped them feel better. News of Jesus as a healer and teacher spread. But Jesus did not do this work alone. A group of men and women traveled with him. He chose 12 friends, called disciples, to help him teach his ideas to others. "Come, follow me," he said to the disciples. Together, they worked from village to village, sharing their new ideas with anyone who wanted to listen. Mothers and fathers brought their sons and daughters to meet Jesus. At first, the disciples waved them away, worried that the children would bother Jesus. But he gathered the children around him and blessed them. He said, "Let the children come to me." Jesus taught his followers to look for ways to live together in harmony, to learn to forgive, to settle arguments in a peaceful way. He said, "Blessed are those who work to bring peace to the world, for they are the children of God." One of the disciples asked, "What if someone treats me badly? How many times should I forgive them? 7 times? That already seems like a lot." "No," he said, "but 70 times 7 times." Jesus meant that we should always forgive one another. By now, Jesus had many followers, but not everyone was happy about it. The leaders in Jerusalem noticed the big crowds that gathered whenever he spoke. They wondered if the people might quit turning to them for advice and stop following their rules and traditions. Once the disciples knew that the leaders disapproved of Jesus, they were worried. When they gathered for their Passover meal that year, Jesus blessed the bread and wine and gave thanks to God. He said, "May peace be with you." Jesus asked them to remember him and his lessons, no matter what happened. Today, this meal is known as the Last Supper. Some people share bread and wine in church as a way to remember it. After the Last Supper, things happened fast. Soldiers arrested Jesus, saying that he was stirring up trouble. In those days, the worst criminals were punished by being nailed to a wooden cross and left to die, and Jesus was punished in this terrible way. As he suffered on the cross, his mother, Mary, and his friends gathered at his side. They knew Jesus had done nothing wrong, and they were filled with sadness. After Jesus died, his followers carried on his teaching and honored his memory. Jesus' message of love and kindness spread through the world. Now, 2,000 years later, we can still remember the life and lessons of Jesus. And it is important to remember him because he taught us to treat people with love and to stand up for justice and peace. And now we're going to sing our children on our way. And you can find the music in the pew pocket in front of you.
This is the time during the service when we pause for contemplation. Our lives may be hectic, we may often be distracted. So, with intention and care, we carve out this time to silence our minds and hearts. This is a time that some call meditation and others name prayer. Breathe with me the breath of life. Breathe in for loving, for acceptance, and with a sense of calm. Breathe out the sorrow, the division, and the stress. Inhale as we share this interwoven, intricate web of affinity. Exhale as we feel one another's presence. Breathe with me as we gather to do the holy work of kinship and support. Open your mind, open your heart. Today I share this seasonal prayer by the Reverend Paul Beadle. Let us contemplate the Spirit together, Spirit of life and love, justice and peace. 6 weeks ago, our Christian neighbors held their rite of ashes, and this past week they scattered palms from which next year's ashes will be made, and commemorated the death of the ancient leader whose ministry inspires their faith and traditions. Today, they celebrate the story of a miracle which is known as his victory over death and is said to be the salvation of all people. They have been doing this now for thousands of years, at the season when the earth awakes from winter, the season of the flowers, just as our Jewish neighbors at the same season celebrate a miracle of liberation from oppression, just as our neighbors of other faiths, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and more, celebrate the birth of gods and the start of new years. And this year, we acknowledge that our Muslim neighbors are observing the month of fasting, prayer, and reflection known as Ramadan. Just as we each year celebrate the earth, our home. Come what may, O Spirit of life, help us to see beyond belief to the goods and blessings and values that we, in our common humanity, use these symbols and seasons to remember. May we and our neighbors of all faiths also remember what binds us across our differences of custom and belief. May we see beyond our common humanity, our common commitments, and may we together fill the world with love, understanding, and peace. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, so may it be. Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. From the book we read, Charles Johnson's wife is undergoing her 4th chemo treatment and is guardedly optimistic about the outcome. Prayers from the church are welcomed, and happy Easter. We send our condolences to the McGrew family. Courtney's father, Jim Wheeler, passed away recently. We hold them in our hearts during a difficult time. The 3rd Ward and City of Houston lost 2 important leaders in March, Ada Edwards and the Reverend Dr. Robert Gilmore. Edwards was a former city council member who fought for social justice, community empowerment, and affordable housing. Reverend Dr. Gilmore's urban ministry was through his Real Urban Counselors and the Hope After Recovery and Wellness Project. We join with their families in the 3rd Ward community in mourning their losses and celebrating their lives. We now turn to a practice inspired by African, indigenous, and pagan traditions. We say aloud or bring to mind those who we wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the beauty, diversity, and mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
In the quiet of this place, let this moment fill with grace. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. May the sense of mystery guide us through our journey. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. This is my prayer.
Each week, our morning offering is shared with an organization that shares our Unitarian Universalist principles and through which we may live out our values in the world. Today, we share our offering with the help or to support the Faithful Fools, a Unitarian Universalist street mission in San Francisco that has been involved in the training of hundreds of ministers in community action. To celebrate their 25th anniversary, they've asked Unitarian Universalists across the country to dedicate one of our shared offerings to them. And here is Carmen Barsotti, one of their founders, to say more.
Good morning. How wonderful to greet you this morning from San Francisco, California. I am Carmen Barsotti, co-founder of Faithful Fools, together with Reverend Kay Jorgensen, who was a Unitarian Universalist minister. Kay passed away in 2018, but her determination and her great spirit is forever present. Faithful Fools began 25 years ago in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, but our work extends to Nicaragua, where I lived and worked for 7 years, and it also extends in many places throughout the United States and in other countries where many fools roam. We were founded as an educational and charitable institution. Our primary attitude in all that we do is that we are always learning. When we began, we said we wanted to help build a community of people from all walks of life that work together for personal and social change. Like the fool in the king's court, we stay connected to the common people, and we risk speaking what we see to the kings and queens of our time. We learn through direct engagement. Ministers and doctors, nurses, high school and university students, people like you and me, learn together through our work of accompaniment of people who are struggling with homelessness, addiction, mental illness, not only in impoverished communities, but more and more in the communities at all levels of society. As Kay and I printed in our very first brochure, fools see the world in all its glorious absurdity and act on what they see. In our mission statement, we say, "We discover on the streets our common humanity." Since 1998, more than 10,000 people have participated in street retreats. Maybe some of you have at General Assembly or through a coming of age program. Colin made one of our very first street retreats when he was here in San Francisco. I want to thank you for your generosity this morning. It makes possible the work that we do. As one of our volunteers said, generosity breeds generosity. We live here in the community. We are able to respond to needs as they arise at any hour of the day or night. At this time, we are not only being called upon to respond to growing homelessness in San Francisco, but we also have had a number of people from Nicaragua arrive at our door as they seek asylum. We are temporarily housing some of them as they find their footing in the United States. May you know that what you give today will meet many needs and allow us to live into our next decades. And if you are ever in San Francisco, please come knock on our door. We would love to share this work with you. Thank you.
Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in your order of service, and those watching the live stream will see it on their screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask that you give generously. An offering will now be gratefully received. Please join with me in reading our words to dedicate our offering found on your laminated pew card. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are our offerings.
The first reading is from Isaiah. Awake, awake, clothe yourself with splendor. O arm of the Lord, awake as in days of old, as in former ages. It was you that hacked Rahab in pieces, that pierced the dragon. It was you that dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the abysses of the sea a road that the redeemed might walk. So let the ransomed of the Lord return and come with shouting to Zion. Crowned with joy everlasting, let them attain joy and gladness, while sorrow and sighing flee.
The second reading is Acts 10:38 through 43. You know how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, because God was with him, and he went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil. And we can bear witness to all he did in the countryside and Jerusalem. They put him to death, hanging him on a gibbet, but God raised him to life on the third day and allowed him to be clearly seen, not by the whole people, but by witnesses whom God had chosen in advance, by us, who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead.
The next reading is from 1 Corinthians. Scripture says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the cleverness of the clever. Where is your wise man now, your man of learning, your subtle debater of the present age? God made the wisdom of this world look foolish. As God in his wisdom ordained, the world failed to find him by its wisdom, and he chose by the folly of the gospel to save those who have faith.
The fourth reading is from the Treatise on Resurrection. What am I telling you now? The living will die. How do they live in illusion? The rich become poor and kings are overthrown. All changes. The world is illusion. Why do I seem to shout? The resurrection has nothing of this character. It is truth standing firm. It is revelation of what is and the transformation of things and a transition into freshness. Incorruptibility floods over corruption. Light rivers down upon the darkness, swallowing obscurity. The pleroma fills the hollow. These are the symbols and images of resurrection. They establish its goodness.
I invite you to open your hymnals to number 95, the gray hymnals. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing together. There is more love somewhere.
Thank you.
When I was in my early 20s, I used to take part in a lot of mass mobilizations. It was the era of giant puppets and paper mache. On the streets of, say, Chicago or Seattle or Washington, D.C., it was not uncommon to see massive figurines lumbering down the streets being maneuvered by an entire team, making nodes in a swirling river of dissent. There, Mother Earth in battle against a monopoly banker. There, a caricature of the president, and there, a chorus of masked dancers representing solar power combating fossil fuels. There, the range of puppets was only limited by the imagination of the puppeteers and the target of outrage. Creative interpretations of what best symbolized the anti-war, pro-labor, and ecological movements abounded. Each hinted at the absurd possibility that the world might yet be turned upside down, that there was more love to be found somewhere, more joy, more justice, that a planet filled with violence might find peace, that the looming ecological catastrophe might yet be averted, that racism, white supremacy could be overcome. Now, I suspect that a few of you participated in some of those mobilizations and that more of you saw images of them on television or the internet, or back in those days, I suppose, the print media. If you only observed such events from the distance, you might not have known that the puppets were often accompanied by wonderful acts of street theater. One of my favorites was a group that called themselves the Groucho Marxists. The routine was pretty much like it sounds. Clowns dressed in the style of Groucho Marx paraded about, with greased-on black smears for mustaches, classic suits, uncontrolled ties, and wire-rimmed glasses. They would banter about the street, either handing out slips of quotations or making proclamations from both of the Marxes. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. These are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others. The whole experience was surreal, absurd, foolish. But that was the point, to disrupt the ordinary and suggest that the impossible is actually possible. I suspect that even if you haven't been in a street protest, you've had a similar experience in some sort of different venue. Circuses, of course, obviously come to mind. I mean, who can forget the clouds infinitely unfolding from a tiny car, or the infinitely extending bouquet of tissue flowers, or just bouncing around in those ridiculous shoes. Puppets, street theater, I offer you this panoply of images as an atypical entry point into Easter reflections. God made the wisdom of the world look foolish, claims a Christian text. I believe because it is absurd, a statement widely misattributed to the early North African Christian theologian Tertullian, and that forms a bedrock of much Christian theology. I think of such words this time of year when I, the fairly rationalist Unitarian Universalist minister, am called upon to preach an Easter sermon. I believe because it is absurd. The thing that Tertullian never actually said can be taken as the summit of anti-rationalist religion. It refers to the literal resurrection of Jesus, a proposition that most Unitarian Universalists find at the very least uncomfortable and quite frequently more than dubious. I believe because it is absurd, there's something about the words that speak to me, though, of the essence of faith. They remind me of the truth that so often when things seem difficult or impossible, there remains a chance that they can be different. We Unitarian Universalists have long had a tradition of focusing on the life rather than the death of Jesus. This always leaves us somewhat confused on Easter. If the resurrection of the dead is not particularly important, then what is the point, after all, of the holiday? I take it as an opportunity to recall some of the actual teachings of Jesus, as encountered in texts so often labeled dissident or heretical. There we find he taught something I like to call the resurrection of the living. It's not all that different than how the Buddha described himself when asked who he was. He's said to have replied, "I am awake." Jesus provided a similar teaching when asked about the resurrection. It is the truth standing firm. It is the revelation of what is and the transformation of things and a transition into freshness. The revelation of what is. Faith is, in part, the understanding that it is possible to make a way out of no way. The resurrection of the living, the revelation of what is, sometimes simply revolves around waking up to the reality that the future is unwritten, nothing is constant, and that there's always some outside chance in our most difficult moments that our lives will take a turn for the better. That in this day of difficult politics and in a difficult world, love might overcome the politics of cruelty. And we might yet see a world where in our personal lives and in the state of Tennessee, white supremacy and hatred do not wave supreme, and it is not possible to expel black legislatures from the state legislature, where anti-LGBTQ legislation is not allowed to run rampant across the country, where the rights of women are respected, where love can conquer and transform hate. In this understanding that the absurd might yet be possible, I have benefited in my years from knowing clowns, blessed fools. Two come to me this morning. One was Oscar, who would sometimes appear seemingly from nowhere. And then there was the man who simply called himself stupid. An old labor organizer. I never met him directly, but he mentored many of my mentors, and I spent most of my 20s hearing stories about his exploits. Oscar and stupid both helped me to wake up to what is, to undergo the resurrection of the living, to better understand the absurdity of faith, and trust that sometimes the impossible may yet become possible. Let us start with Oscar. She was better known as the Reverend Kay Jorgensen, the longtime community minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, and the co-founder of the Faithful Fools. A community minister, I should note, because we don't have one here in Houston, is different than a parish minister. Reverend Scott and I are both parish ministers. We primarily serve this congregation. A community minister is, in contrast, someone whose name is, as it suggests, someone who serves a community organization, and through that organization, the wider community. Typically, they have a relationship with a congregation. They're a member and accountable to the congregation, but they're not employed by the church or responsible for things like leading Sunday morning services or overseeing the administration of the campus. Kay was an unusual minister. She got ordained in her mid-50s. Now, some people run away from the church to join the circus, but Kay ran away from the circus to join the church. I mean, not quite like that, but in her early years, she trained as a mime and spent the first half of her working life clowning. And from her gently hilarious feats of pantomime, she learned that humor and love always have the power to break down barriers. It was something that she deployed when trying to build a new sense of spirit into the church and the religious communities she served. I remember coffee hours in San Francisco when she would welcome visitors who seemed uncomfortable with a spontaneous bit of miming, a clown nose that would appear out of almost nowhere, or quarters that were pulled behind nervous children's ears, or sometimes even a faked tumble. She could also use her humor to great effect to transform uncomfortable congregational meetings. I remember one where she was present. We were debating some action that the congregation wanted to take. The precise subject is unimportant, but it involved a stretch of the congregation's finances to start a new nonprofit in the neighborhood to serve the community. Now, I'm not sure why she was there. Since she was a community minister, she often didn't attend such things. But whatever the case, the objective of the action was widely viewed as desirable, but well beyond the congregation's resources. The conversation grew heated. Kay just sat there, saying nothing. Things got more tense. The reasonable people in the room insisted that the proposed plan of action was simply impossible. Its advocates, of course, took the other position. No middle ground was being found. Finally, someone asked Kay for her opinion. She responded by quoting a line from the Blues Brothers. "It's 106 miles to Chicago. We've got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark and we're wearing sunglasses." When asked to clarify, she refused to say anything else. Everybody was confused. People started laughing. And somehow the direction of the conversation completely changed. And the congregation proceeded to vote to fund this nonprofit, which previously they had said was impossible. And that nonprofit went on to provide services to the community for more than a decade. Now, her personal chief ministry was with the Faithful Fools, which Carmen told us about a little while ago. They see their work as bridging the divide that exists and separates people. In all that they do, they challenge us to reflect on the simple question: what is it that separates us? It is a question that is designed to spur the resurrection of the living, the waking up to what is. And they couple it with a very simple and profound spiritual practice they call street retreats. Now, most of us think of retreats as rarefied events. They only take place in spaces outside of our ordinary lives and typically involve traveling to places beyond those that we regularly inhabit. Some of you, for instance, just joined Carol and myself at U in Kerrville for a weekend in a rural oasis where it's possible to escape the rigid pressures of daily life, work, school, even having to cook a meal. There were wondrous stars at night, trails that we could walk with wildflowers and brambles, and ample opportunities for relaxed reflection. Street retreats are just the opposite. They take place in familiar spaces and challenge participants to experience those places in new ways. Rather than traveling to some far-off center in search for spiritual engagement, participants are invited to walk the streets surrounding the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco for an afternoon, a day, or sometimes even a week. Now, there's only two real rules. First, you're not allowed to spend any money. And second, you have to stay on the streets. That's it. Walk through the streets, pay attention, talk to the people you encounter, and as you do, continually ask the question, what is it that separates us? The San Francisco Society, like the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, is a center city congregation. The Bay Area has a problem with homelessness. There are tens of thousands of people who live on the streets. Many of them live near the society. Being in the streets for any length of time means actually engaging with the unhoused. And if you're going to eat with no money, well, then you're going to have to end up going through the same soup lines that they go through and learn what that feels like. Kay even made it her practice to sleep on the streets. She was particularly fond of sleeping on the front steps of the church. On longer retreats, she invited participants to do the same. All the while, she and Carmen asked people to reflect on that simple question: what is it that keeps us separate? The more the question was asked, the more participants, in Kay's words, recognize ourselves waking up to an understanding that homelessness is not a state of being. It is an event in time. Waking up to the reality that housed or unhoused, people are all more alike than we are different. Waking up to the truth that homelessness exists because of the vast structures of economic violence that ensure that housing is connected to employment, that demand that housing is provided only at a profit, and that you need to have wealth or income in order to have a home. Waking up, though, also to the truth that even in the most difficult spaces, there remains something of hope and beauty. Asgard always had the potential to appear with a clown's nose, a non sequitur, or a strange routine. Waking up to the truth that love calls us to build housing for all, and be open to the absurd possibility that there might yet be justice in this world. What separates us? It is an absurdly simple question. Absurdly simple questions were the forte of stupid. Before fleeing to Canada to escape imprisonment for his political beliefs, he had been an organizer with a labor union in the 19-teens and 20s called the Industrial Workers of the World, or the Wobblies. He believed that there is an inevitable conflict at work between employers and workers, and also sought to teach the practice of radical democracy and teach people how to implement it both on the job and in their lives. Now, I used to organize with that union, and I've shared with you some of my own experiences in the past of people implementing that philosophy. It revolves around direct action, the idea that the best way to solve a problem is to solve it when it arises, where it arises. I offered an example of this a few months ago when I told you the story of workers at a pizza parlor who began the practice of binning gloves when management refused to deal with a particular safety issue. You might recall that the workers at this particular restaurant were constantly burning themselves because management refused to buy adequate safety gear. They talked and begged and pleaded with the managers to get them the gloves they needed. Finally, they came up with this game of binning gloves. It was very simple. At the end of every shift, they checked the gloves, and if there were holes in them, they threw them in the bins behind the restaurant. Now, the manager would try to stop them, of course, and insist that they continue to use the unsafe equipment. But it's hard to monitor who's putting what in the trash all the time. And by the end of a couple of shifts, the gloves were all so bad that they had been gone, and pretty soon there were no gloves left. And the managers didn't know who had binned them all. And so in order to keep the restaurant open, they had to rush out immediately and buy new oven gloves. And the tactic worked, and after that, there was always adequate gloves. I just share that story because it's the sort of thing that Stupid would taught my mentors to tell people like me about how to solve a problem at work. I was told that he always looked for the most obvious or direct solution to a problem, even if it seemed like it was impossible or unwise. To a problem with gloves like holes, he would suggest just throw them out. If told that that direct solution was impractical, his tactic was always to reply, "Well, what do I know? I'm stupid." Part of what he taught was just to get people to ask the question of why and then offer them space to reflect. When organizing a labor union, this might be the simple question of why do you work where you work? Why is your job unsafe? Why? And usually the retort when the dead end was reached or an uncomfortable answer had been come to, "Well, what do I know? I'm stupid." His stupid questions led him to be a font of wisdom, a constant encouragement to wake up to the world as it really is, and a demand that we bring more love into it. It filled him with sayings that challenged people to recognize the power structures and principalities that they were caught up in and see the world and its possibilities as absurd so that they might live just a little bit differently. Most of what he taught was really just quite simple folk knowledge. He collected it in a series of hand-printed pamphlets that I was given and encouraged to study, and they cover a range of topics from politics to parenting. Brooks, streams, and rivers get very crooked because they take the path of least resistance. Sometimes people do the same, and for the same reason. Children do need love and affection, and those who do the least to attract it quite likely are the ones who need it the most. Even the smallest task becomes impossible to those who are unwilling to try. What do I know? I'm stupid. Giant puppets, the Groucho Marxists, Oscar the Clown, fellow workers stupid. I've shared stories with them about them with you this Easter for two reasons. First, they reflect the message of Jesus as found in his life, not his death. Second, they connect to the classical Unitarian understanding of Jesus, which we should recall whenever we come to this Christian holiday. First, the message of Jesus. Jesus, as portrayed in the Gospels, as Carol reminded us earlier, was a rabble-rouser. He was always going around trying to turn the world upside down. He turned the money changers out of the temple. He preached the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. He challenged the great power of his day, imperial Rome, and called on people to wake up to the world as it is, filled with both injustice and beauty, and ever needing more love to overcome the politics of cruelty. He was, in his own way, a blessed fool. Rather than share stories about him this morning, I've told you about the blessed fools I have known. I've done this because the core of classical Unitarian Christianity, which we would do well to uplift this Easter morning, is that each of us contains within the likeness to God. It is the task of the religious community to help us uncover that likeness and blessing. And it is a likeness that is found when we have the faith to believe in the absurd. We're not asked to believe in the absurd as invoked in those words incorrectly attributed to Tertullian. I believe because it is absurd, speaking of the literal resurrection. We are asked instead to believe in the absurd proposition, proven to be true by the actions of so many seekers of love and justice, that it is possible to make a way out of no way, and that each of us has the potential to wake up to the world as it really is and undergo the resurrection of the living. The resurrection has nothing of this character. It is truth standing firm. It is revelation of what is, and the transformation of things, and a transition into freshness. May we each experience, through the lives of blessed fools, and in our own lives, something of the resurrection of the living, and wake up to what is. a world where we are called to ask and answer the question, what is it that separates us? And a world where we each know that we can bring a little more justice, a little more love, and a little more compassion into being. So that it might be so, I invite the congregation to say, Amen.
And now I invite you to open up your gray hymnals to number 18. What wondrous love is this? Please rise in body or in spirit and join together as we sing.
On the laminated cards, please join with me in reciting the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us go, always open to the absurd possibility that we might disrupt the ordinary with the extraordinary. There is always a chance to make a way out of no way and find more love somewhere. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen.
We adore thee, God of glory, God of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee. hail thee as the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin, sin and sadness. Drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness. Fill us with the light. Fill us with the light. Oh, fill us with the light of day. Joyful, joyful Lord, we adore thee. God of glory, God of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee. Hail thee as the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin, sin and sadness. Drive the dark of doubt away. Drive it away, giver of immortal gladness. Fill us with the light of day.
Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstuuhouston.org. Thanks so much for joining us.